Even after his victory at the Battle of Gergovia, Vercingetorix was facing significant drawbacks that threatened his insurgency in many ways. Despite Caesar's remarks to the contrary, the Gauls were unlikely ever to have had a great numerical superiority over the Romans. Their infantry forces were far outnumbered by those of the Roman legions. On top of that, the Gaul cavalry had already proved unfit to take on the Germanic horsemen. After a failed initial attack, the Germanics succeeded in gaining high ground and launched a counterattack that tired the Gauls into retreat. When faced with this scenario, Vercingetorix felt the need to fall back and chose to take refuge in the fortress city of Alesia. But the march of Vercingetorix towards it took its toll in terms of casualties. Caesar promptly ordered his legion's baggage to be transferred to the nearest high ground. He appointed 2 of his legions to protect it, while the rest of the army set off in pursuit of Vercingetorix. This continued until dark, and, according to Caesar, the Gauls suffered an additional 3,000 casualties before finally reaching the safety of Alesia. Alesia was the capital of the Mandubi and stood on a limestone plateau with an elevation of approximately 1,300 feet, or about 400 meters above sea level, covering an impressive area. Knowing that Caesar would follow him, Vercingetorix started to prepare for a siege. By then, he had grasped the critical importance of supplies, so he dismissed his cavalry, who would be of no help in a siege, and ordered them to summon support from all over Gaul. But soon after the cavalry left, the Romans reached Alesia. Since a straightforward attack was precluded, the only viable alternative for Caesar was to capture Alesia by means of a siege, which required the construction of fortifications. Over the following days, the Romans dedicated themselves to building a ditch around Alesia, with the aim of cutting it off completely. After this, they set up about building an outward-facing wall, stretching over 16 kilometers, designed to contain the Gallic army. To protect against surprise attacks, 23 forts were built along the perimeter of the siege wall, as garrison points. Inside the Alesia walls, the Gauls prepared themselves with hooks, spears, and siege ladders, which they would use to attack the Roman lines as soon as help arrived from outside Alesia. And that help finally showed up, with Caesar reporting a figure of 250,000 Gauls. While Caesar probably overestimated the number, we can safely say that this was the largest army ever assembled by the Gauls. The tribes engaged in this conflict included practically all of Caesar's conquests since 58 BC, pointing to the impressive scale of the rebellion. The Gauls' strategy was to attack the Romans on 2 concurrent fronts. While Vercingetorix was leading an attack on the enemy's inner lines, the commanders who had just landed would coordinate attacks on the Romans from outside the walls. Caesar found himself entirely surrounded by the Gaul forces, but there was a critical stalemate. Vercingetorix's resources and supplies were quickly running out, making the situation even more desperate. Confronted with this extreme depletion, Vercingetorix was pushed to make an agonizing decision. He handed over all the non-combatants in the city, including famished women and children. This innocent mob headed towards the Roman lines in search of help, even offering themselves up as slaves, but the Romans did not allow them to get through. Meanwhile, the Gauls surrounding the city also refused to take these people back. The result was a senseless tragedy, in which these innocents were left marooned between the fighting lines, meeting a terrible end due to a lack of food, water, and shelter. Moreover, the Gauls were powerless to effectively coordinate the attacks of those inside the walls with the outside troops. At last, Caesar led a decisive charge at just the right moment, pushing back the Gauls. Caesar's superior auxiliary cavalry played a key role in defeating Vercingetorix. The Germanic cavalry used the opportunity to surround and attack the Gaul warriors as they retreated. Discouraged and short of supplies, the Gaul backdrop began to disperse, leaving Vercingetorix isolated in Alesia, with no realistic hope of rescue. The Roman legions were too depleted to launch an immediate pursuit of the retreating Gauls. Yet, at midnight, Caesar commanded his cavalry to be sent in pursuit of the withdrawing Gauls. The Roman horsemen succeeded in reaching the rear of the Gauls and dealt additional casualties during the chase, further increasing the pressure on Vercingetorix's army. The situation inside Alesia was despairing, and the only prospect left was to face a lingering agony caused by starvation. The day after the battle, Vercingetorix held a meeting with tribal leaders and made the decision to offer his own surrender to Caesar. Vercingetorix sent couriers to the Romans seeking terms of agreement, but the response he received was unyielding. Only a complete surrender would be accepted. Plutarch told how Vercingetorix made a dramatic escape from the city. Wearing his best armor, he rode through the gates and bypassed Caesar, who was sitting in a courtroom. In a symbolic gesture of surrender, he dismounted from his horse and threw his armor on the ground. He then sat down at Caesar's feet, lying motionless until he was handed over to the Roman soldiers, who would hold him captive until Caesar's triumph. The other Gaul warriors were delivered as slaves to the Roman legionaries, with the exception of the Aedui, whom Caesar allowed to return to their homes in keeping with his previous alliance with the tribe. In turn, Vercingetorix was put in chains and sent to Rome, where he was kept prisoner for the next 6 years. In 46 BC, Caesar was finally ready to celebrate his triumph, and Vercingetorix was brought in chains before Caesar's chariot, serving as living proof of Gaul's defeat. It was the traditional way for a captured enemy leader to be paraded during a Roman triumph. After this event, Vercingetorix was finally executed. This tragic turn of events sealed the end of Gallic resistance. The Gauls, however, never forgot the time they were united as a nation under Vercingetorix's leadership. Once Vercingetorix had been crushed, Caesar and his Roman legions launched campaigns against the Gauls to eliminate any chance of rebellion, allowing the Romans to achieve the much-desired regional peace. Ultimately, over a period of 8 years, Julius Caesar seized not only the whole of Gaul, but also parts of Britannia. This achievement not only solidified his military dominance, but also made him extremely wealthy, owing to the resources and loot obtained during the Gallic Wars. He also achieved a legendary reputation as a strategist and military leader. The Gallic Wars helped Caesar's rise to prominence on the Roman political scene, granting him the legitimacy to later unleash a civil war against Pompey and the Roman Senate. If you enjoyed learning more about Caesar's conquest of Gaul, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Until the next video.